okay. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It was an accident, I swear.
What's the first rule of hide and seek? Don't make a sound. The second rule, don't let them find you. But there's a third unspoken rule they never tell you. Make sure you're playing with someone who's going to stop. 20 years ago, in a quiet Ohio suburb, I broke that third rule. I hid in the perfect spot in a house that had been empty for years. I heard the seeker coming up the stairs. I heard the bedroom door open. And then I heard a voice that wasn't my friend's whisper through the keyhole. It's been 2 decades. I've moved cities, changed my life. But some games don't end just because you go home. Some seekers are always seeking. This is what happens when you win a game you were never supposed to play. We all have that one memory that feels like a crack in the foundation of our normal life. A moment where the world as you understood it just shifted. For me, it wasn't a ghost in a cemetery or a figure in a foggy forest. It was in my best friend's new house, on a warm summer night, surrounded by the sounds of our laughing families. It was during the most innocent childhood game imaginable. What I learned that night is that fear has a taste. It's the taste of dust and old wood and your own stale breath. And that darkness isn't empty. It's a waiting room. I've carried this story for most of my life, and sharing it now feels like pulling a splinter from deep under my skin. It might help you understand the shadows in your own home a little better. Or it might make you afraid of them forever. The memory begins not with fear, but with the golden, magical boredom of a late 90s summer. The air was thick with the smell of cut grass and charcoal lighter fluid. I was 12, all scabbed knees and boundless, untethered energy. My best friend, Leo, had just moved into the grand, somewhat forbidding house at the dead end of Maple Drive. Everyone called it the Carson Place. It was a Victorian-era holdout, a 3-story sentinel of weathered gray shingles and ornate, peeling trim that watched over the ranch-style homes around it. It had stood vacant for nearly a decade, the subject of every kid's ghost story. That night, our parents were having a moving-in barbecue. From the sprawling, overgrown backyard, we could hear the clink of beer bottles and the warm murmur of adult conversation, a soundtrack of safety. Leo, grinning with the pride of new ownership, dared me to a game of hide and seek inside. "The whole house," he said, his eyes wide. "No base. Just don't leave." The interior was a cathedral of unpacked chaos. Towers of cardboard boxes cast long, strange shadows in the dying evening light filtering through dusty bay windows. Furniture lay under ghostly white sheets, creating humped, silent forms that made my heart skip even before the game began. The air was cold, a stark contrast to the summer night outside, and it smelled of forgotten things, linseed oil, mildew, and the faint, sweet scent of decaying wallpaper paste. Leo stood in the vast, empty foyer, his back to the grand staircase, and began to count. 1, 2, the numbers echoed, bouncing off the high ceilings and bare floors, sounding less like a game and more like a ritual. I took off, my sneakers squeaking a frantic tattoo on the polished oak. I bypassed obvious spots, behind a sheet-draped couch, inside an empty kitchen cupboard. The house seemed to pull me upward. The staircase groaned under my weight, each creak a betrayal. The upstairs hallway was a tunnel of deep, plum-colored shadow, the last of the sunset only painting the far window a bloody orange. Doors lined the hall, all closed but one. The last door on the left was slightly ajar, an inch of profound blackness beckoning. I slipped inside. It was a small, spare bedroom, empty save for a single monolithic piece of furniture, a wardrobe. It was of dark, almost black oak, ornate with carved swirls and flourishes that in the low light looked less like decoration and more like dense, swirling script. Its door was ajar. I didn't hesitate. I crossed the room, the floorboards sighing beneath me, and pulled the heavy door open. The inside was a cavern of deeper darkness, smelling overwhelmingly of camphor and cedar, undercut by something else, a a dry, earthy smell like a root cellar. A single, heavy wool coat hung inside. I pushed it to the side, the rough fabric scraping against my arm, and crammed myself into the back corner, pulling my knees to my chest. Then I reached out, grabbed the inner handle, and pulled the door shut. The click of the latch engaging was deafeningly final. Absolute blackness swallowed me. The only light was a single, razor-thin sliver of pale yellow from the hallway, visible through a tiny, imperfect seam in the wardrobe's door. I heard Leo's distant, triumphant "ready or not, here I come." It was muffled worlds away. I remember a flush of victory so potent I could taste it. I had outsmarted him. I had vanished. In that perfect, silent darkness I waited. I listened to the faint, muffled sounds of the game below, the thump of running, a distant, playful shriek, the calling of "Ollie, Ollie, oxen free" for someone else. I settled in, a smug smile on my face. I had won, the perfect spot, the perfect game. It was the last moment of my childhood where I felt truly, innocently clever. Time, in that absolute dark, became elastic. Minutes stretched into amorphous, weighty things. The initial thrill of my perfect hiding spot began to curdle into a dull, itchy boredom. The camphor scent was giving me a headache. My left foot was tingling, falling asleep. I shifted minutely, and the old wood of the wardrobe let out a groan so loud in the enclosed space I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. I listened intently. Downstairs, the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. The distant echoes of my brother and Leo's chase had ceased. Maybe they'd given up. Maybe they were eating cake. I was about to push the door open and declare my victory when I heard the footsteps on the stairs. But they were wrong. Leo had been a tornado of noise, stomping, skipping, sliding. These footsteps were a slow, deliberate cadence. Thud, creak, thud, creak. Each step was a distinct, weighty event, as if the person was unfamiliar with the stairs or was savoring the ascent. A cold needle of unease pricked at the base of my spine. Leo's messing with me, I thought, forcing the logic into my panicking mind. He's trying to scare me. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and stopped. The silence that followed was a physical presence, thick and listening. Then they began again, moving down the hallway toward my room. Step, drag, a step, drag. Not a limp exactly, but a hesitation, as if one foot was reluctant to leave the floor. They stopped right outside the bedroom door. Through the hairline crack in the wardrobe door, I saw the sliver of hallway light dim, then be blotted out entirely by a shadow that filled the doorway. The door let out a long, agonized groan as it was pushed inward, swinging wide open on complaining hinges. The shadow figure was now in the room. I could see a slice of the floor, and on it, illuminated by the faint hallway glow, was a foot. It was bare, pale as a grub, and visibly dirty. The toenails were long, thick, and yellowed, curling over the toes like talons. It was positioned oddly, not flat-footed, but resting more on the ball as if ready to spring. It didn't move. It just stood there, a monument of wrongness. My breath hitched in my throat, a tiny, traitorous sound. I clapped a hand over my mouth, my eyes wide and straining in the dark. The logic shattered. This wasn't Leo. This wasn't a joke. The air temperature in the wardrobe seemed to drop 10 degrees. The smell of camphor was now overwhelmed by that earthy, root-cellar smell, stronger now, mixed with a new, coppery tang, like old pennies and wet soil. My muscles began to tremble from the strain of staying perfectly still. I was no longer a boy winning a game. I was prey, and something was in the room with me. The standing was worse than the moving. That filthy, bare foot remained planted, a dreadful anchor in my slice of vision. I prayed for it to be Leo. I prayed for him to burst out laughing, to call me a sucker, to flood the room with the normal, brash sound of his voice. The prayer died unborn. A sound began, so low I felt it in my teeth before I heard it in my ears. A dry, rhythmic shushing, like someone rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. It was coming from just outside the wardrobe. It took my paralyzed brain a second to recognize it as breathing. Labored, deliberate breathing. Then, the voice. It didn't come from a human mouth in front of the keyhole. It seemed to seep through the wood itself, materializing in the still air inside the wardrobe with me. It was a ruin of a voice, a whisper dragged over gravel. "I see you," it breathed. The words weren't just heard. They were felt, a foul caress on the back of my neck. Every hair on my body stood erect. A warm rush of urine soaked my jeans, the shame instantly consumed by sheer animal terror. I squeezed my eyes shut, a childish reflex, as if not seeing it could make it not exist. My mind screamed fragments of thoughts. "It can't be real, it can't be real, it's a dream, wake up, wake up, wake up." The wardrobe door trembled. Not a shake, but a subtle vibration, as if a single, long finger was dragging itself slowly down the outside panel, from the top to the level of my face. I could hear the minute crackle of old varnish under that imagined pressure. The finger, or what felt like a finger, stopped directly opposite my eyes. I stared, unblinking, at the blank wood, seeing nothing but imagining everything. The root cellar smell was now suffocating, filling my lungs with each terrified, shallow gasp. I was beginning to feel lightheaded. Just as the pressure in my chest felt like it would crack my ribs, salvation came from another world. From far below, muffled by layers of floor and door, Leo's real voice, bright and annoyed, shouted, "Dude, I give up. Where are you? Mom has cake." The moment the sound pierced the silence of the upstairs, the atmosphere in the room changed. It was a palpable shift, like a current reversing. The shadow in my sliver of view flinched. The dirty foot pivoted silently on the ball, the long toenails scraping faintly on the wood. The heavy, dragging footsteps moved again, crossing the room and back into the hallway. But they didn't go toward the stairs. They receded down the hallway, away from the staircase, growing fainter until they melted back into the watchful silence of the house. I was alone again, but the aloneness was different now. It was the aloneness of a mouse that has just seen the shadow of the owl pass over its hiding place. The owl was still in the tree. It was just waiting for the mouse to move. Time lost all meaning. I floated in a numb, shocky void, curled in a ball of my own filth and fear. The sounds of the barbecue had faded, cars had pulled away. My family must have assumed I was sleeping over at Leo's. The thought of them leaving, of the house emptying except for me and the thing in the hallway, was a new layer of ice on my soul. The darkness inside the wardrobe was no longer just an absence of light. It had become a viscous, pressing substance. My legs were slabs of cramping concrete. My throat was a desert. I had to move. I had to risk it. The alternative, to stay entombed in that box until morning, was unthinkable. With a courage that was purely physical, a desperation of aching muscles, I slowly, silently uncurled. Every joint popped in the stillness. I placed a trembling hand flat against the wardrobe door. Taking a breath that shuddered all the way down to my toes, I pushed. The door opened an inch with a groan that sounded like a scream. A sliver of the room reappeared. It was empty. The hallway door was still open. The landing at the top of the stairs was a pool of deep shadow, the only light a faint, sickly yellow glow from the nightlight in the downstairs bathroom, casting long, distorted shapes up the stairwell. My plan was simple: crawl. Staying low, beneath the line of sight of anything that might be looking in from the hallway, I slithered out of the wardrobe. The floor was brutally cold. I moved on my belly like a soldier under wire, my eyes fixed on the hallway door. The silence was a heavy blanket, but it was a listening silence. I reached the bedroom doorway and pressed myself against the wall, pausing to listen. Nothing. Just the low, subauditory hum of an old house at night. I began to inch down the hallway, my back against the wall, facing the closed doors of the other rooms. I passed the first door. The second. I was halfway to the stairs. Then, from right beside me, a soft click. I stopped dead, my blood turning to slush. The door to the room next to me, the one that had been firmly closed when I ran past hours ago, was now open a crack. Not wide. Just an inch of pure black void. And from that void it came again. The voice. But it was different now. It wasn't a rasping whisper. It was a dry, conversational murmur as if speaking to someone else in the room or to itself. It was a string of words, barely intelligible. Warm here, good hider still, seeking, won't count. I didn't turn my head. I didn't look into the crack. Every primal instinct in my body shrieked that to meet its gaze was to die. I broke. The careful, silent escape plan vaporized. I sprang from the wall and ran. I didn't care about noise. I flew down the hallway, my socks slipping on the wood, my shoulder crashing into the wall as I rounded the corner to the stairs. I took the staircase in 3 chaotic, crashing bounds, stumbled across the foyer, fumbled with the heavy front door lock, and then burst out into the blessed, humid, mosquito-filled summer night. I didn't stop running until the light of my own kitchen window was in view, a beacon of impossible normalcy. The aftermath was a slow, chilling unraveling. That night, breathless and tear-streaked, I told my parents I'd had a fight with Leo and ran home. I threw my urine-soaked jeans in the trash and took a shower so long the water ran cold, scrubbing at my skin until it was raw, trying to remove the smell of camphor and earth. I told myself it was a hallucination, a panic attack, a waking dream born of an overactive imagination in a creepy house. But the story refused to be buried. At school, Leo was different. The vibrant, mischievous kid was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed, jumpy ghost of himself. He stopped calling me. When I approached him, his responses were monosyllabic. One afternoon, a few weeks later, he finally spoke to me on the playground, his voice flat. "I can't sleep," he said, not meeting my eyes. "They're scratching in the walls, not like mice, like fingernails. On the other side of the plaster." My mouth went dry. He continued, "And sometimes, right before I fall asleep, I hear someone counting, really slowly, from inside my closet, but they never get past 7. They just start over." I stared at him, the sunny playground around us tilting on its axis. Before I could form a response, he walked away. A month after that, they were gone. The "for sale" sign went back up. Rumor was it was a sudden job transfer. I called his new number once. A stranger answered. We were 12. Life moved on. But the memory of that wardrobe, that voice, that foot became my secret core of dread. Years later, as an adult with the resources of the internet and a gnawing, unresolved need for answers, I went digging. I found the property records, a dizzying carousel of owners, none staying more than a few years. I accessed old local newspaper archives. And there, in a microfiche scan from 1924, I found it. A brief article about an eccentric former schoolmaster named Alastair Gable, who lived at that address. He was questioned in the disappearance of 3 local boys who were last seen playing in the woods near his property. Lack of evidence forced his release. The article quoted a neighbor saying Gable was a loner, but fond of children, often inviting them in for games. My heart was a drum in my throat. I visited the local historical society. An elderly volunteer, seeing my persistent research, pulled me aside after hours. Her voice dropped to a whisper. My mother lived on that street as a girl. She was told never to go near Gable's house. She said he had a game he liked to play with children who wandered into his yard. He'd cover his eyes and count. And he had a rule. If he found you, you had to stay and play again. Forever. She looked at me, her eyes old and knowing. They say he didn't just like hide and seek. He believed the ones who were truly silent, the best hiders, they were special, that he could keep them. So, what was it? Was the thing in the hallway the ghost of a monstrous man, forever bound to repeat his terrible game, seeking new playmates from beyond the grave? Or did my sheer, concentrated terror in that wardrobe somehow act as a key, unlocking a door to a dimension where such a creature exists, drawn by the psychic energy of a child's perfect, silent hide? I've wrestled with both explanations for 2 decades. Neither offers comfort. This is what I know for a fact. Leo and I started a game of hide and seek. We called a conclusion. We went home. But in that house, a count was started that night that was never finished. The seeker is still waiting. The rules are still in play. And sometimes, in the dead of night, in the silence of my own home, I'll hear the old floorboards settle and my breath will catch. Because in that moment, it doesn't sound like settling wood. It sounds like a slow, deliberate step dragging from the hallway outside my door. The lesson I've been forced to learn is a harsh one. The world is not a passive backdrop. It absorbs, it remembers. A house, a forest, a place where intense emotion, especially terror, has been poured out can become a reservoir for it. We think of games as separate from reality, with clear start and stop points. But some energies, once summoned, don't recognize the word stop. My story is a plea for a specific kind of awareness. It's not about believing in ghosts. It's about respecting the echo. That feeling of being watched from an empty room, that sudden chill, the family pet staring fixedly at a corner. These might not be your imagination. They might be the faint, residual vibrations of someone else's forgotten game, still playing out on a loop. Trust that deep, animal part of you that knows when fun has curdled into fear. That knows when to run. If you've ever felt that shift, if you have a story where the rules of reality seem to bend, share it below. There's strength in knowing these cracks exist, and that we've peered through them and survived. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It tells the algorithm you want more truths from the shadows. And hit the bell, because you never want to be caught unaware when the counting starts. Until next time, remember, not everything that seeks you ever plans to let you go. Sleep well.
Thank you for watching.